All right, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. This is the September the 7th edition, 2016, our first full Wednesday. Yeah, I guess it is our first full Wednesday of September. Welcome to the show tonight. We're going to be wrapping up our tropics talk. Seems like we've been talking about Hermine for a very long time, and so we're going to kind of put Hermine to bed, per se, as she has finally I guess lost her status. The National Hurricane Center has discontinued all advisories, so we're going to kind of recap Hermine. We have Matt Reagan on with us tonight. He is the meteorologist at Florida State, also AMS chair for that area. So Matt was right in the crosshairs of Hermine. So we'll talk with Matt, and then we'll also talk with Shay, who Hermine visited next. And then as Hermine ventured up the East Coast, we'll talk with Peter about all the weather up in the Jersey area. So our panelists actually have all of the bases covered, per se, here. So we are happy to have Matt on with us tonight, talking about the effects it had there in the Gulf Coast. But before we do that, let's take care of a few housekeeping rules. This is a live broadcast, so if you do want to interact with us tonight, you can do that one of a few ways. You can get us on Twitter at Carolina WX Group. Feel free to send those tweets in, or you can put the message or comments or questions on our Facebook page. We'll get to those, or you can do them on our Google Plus page. Does anybody use Google Plus anymore?
No. I check it. That's about it.
So.
So saying anymore implies someone ever actually used it before.
Yeah, I think it tried, but it just never made it. Kind of like those earbuds that Apple brought out today. I don't think those are going to be around long, but that's for another discussion. Anyway, welcome. We're going to welcome our panelists. Let's go around the mahogany table, as James Spann likes to talk about. And I think the only guy who had some weather in the area today is Mr. David Reese. David, you guys had some storms up there in the Charlottesville area today.
Yeah, we're actually dealing with one right now in Louisa County, which is the county just to the east of Charlottesville and Albemarle County here in central Virginia. So if you remember that earthquake back in 2011 that rocked the East Coast to Mineral area, that's where the storm is right now. So yeah, that's been fun. Shay and I were talking about this yesterday, and we can all thank this to Hermine. So we're finally actually getting some kind of rain from Hermine. It only took, 6-7 days after, or 5 days after landfall for it to finally impact us here in central Virginia. But still, it's been hot. Today we still managed to get up to 93, 94. We hit 94 yesterday. We got into the lower 90s on Monday. So definitely abnormally warm here across central Virginia over the past couple of days. More heat and humidity in the forecast the next couple of days. Next week, hopefully we'll cool off a little bit closer to average. But yeah, definitely all the fun is happening in my backyard here in central Virginia this afternoon.
Sorry, someone was trying to FaceTime me. They know that I'm doing this on Wednesday nights. Let's go over to the Jersey area where, Peter, I'm assuming you've got all the suitcases unpacked from all your fun and adventures where you're supposed to evacuate the coast and all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah, it was something terrible, let me tell you. You know, on Sunday I was relaxing on my patio with beautiful sunshine and a nice little breeze from Hermine. You know, it was just great. So, yeah, I'm sure as you all know, nothing happened here in Jersey. Just a couple of showers along the coast, a little bit of wind. It's mostly sunny the whole weekend, so it ruined everybody's plans. But better to be safe than sorry, I guess. But now we're going to be dealing with a heat wave coming up in the next couple of days. We'll be back in the 90s again with heat index over 100. So summer's back with a vengeance again, I guess. But we'll see the next few weeks. Maybe we'll get some fall-like temperatures. I don't know. But I'll have to whip out the long-sleeve plaid again.
Yes. The heat is coming back. And talking of heat, let's toss it down to Kit, who is in the comfy confines of the UNC Charlotte campus. Kit, how was your day today, and how was the weather there in the Queen City?
It's hot. I'm ready for summer to go away. We've got this ridge that's going to be building over the next few days, so it's not going to be proper fall weather for another week or two probably. So that's discouraging to say the least, but school's ramped up. I'm finally getting in the groove of things, so I should be back on a little more regularly now. But other than that, the weather, I'm just, like I said, I'm ready for it to be fall. I like when it's 80 degrees as a max and dew points are in the 50s. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Speaking of Charlotte, this is day number 71 of temperatures at or above 90 degrees. The record is 88. So we could possibly make a run at that, depending on what the long range looks like in September. I know we have at least 4 to 6 more days of 90 or 90-plus temperatures in the Charlotte metro area. So if we don't break that record, we'll be very close to that. So another place where it's – that's a good question. I should have – I think it's 1947, but I didn't –
Is Scotty here?
Uh-oh.
We may have lost Scotty. But
I was going to say, I think we lost Scotty.
Well, let's throw it on down to Shay down in Charleston. Keep it going there.
Hey, kid, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, we're enjoying the weather in the wake of Hermine as it came through this past Friday, and boy, it really stirred things up. We had different variety of winds. We had some southerly winds, and then we had the wraparound northwesterly winds that kind of caught a lot of people off guard. And these tropical systems tend to act real funny when they climb up across the Piedmont areas and especially the Midlands. I think the central area of circulation passed just west of Charleston near Ridgeland or Somerville, but it really dropped a lot of rain to our Midlands. It really joined up with a cold front, rode along the cold front, and then up into the Mid-Atlantic states. So we had quite a bit of weather out of that. Since then, it's been beautiful, drier, sunny. And I tell you, you can smell the fall in the air. It's really coming. So we're doing pretty good here in Charleston.
Looks like we got Scotty back.
Yeah, I guess next time I shouldn't hit the end call button instead of turning my microphone off. But anyways, so it was good in Charleston, Shay.
Yep.
All right, good to go.
No, I was just saying it's beautiful weather here, really gorgeous. It's getting a little bit hot this week, a little bit of humidity climbing up, but I think by next week we'll cool down again. I'd say Saturday, Sunday, Monday, wow, just incredible weather. It's gorgeous.
Awesome. Well, let's dig into the topic tonight. Let's bring in our guest, Matt Reagan, who is a meteorologist at Florida State University and also does a lot of things there on the campus. So, Matt, why don't you introduce yourself to us and kind of give us a little bio about you and just what's got you interested in weather.
All right. Well, it's awesome to be on the show. I've got a lot to talk about because of Hermine. I guess that's why I'm here. I am I used to be one of the producers for the show here. We have a broadcast. That's where I am right now. We actually just ended our first student broadcast of the year. Well, we covered Hermine, but this was officially our air date for the local cable channel. But I used to produce this show. Now I'm kind of in the behind the scenes a little bit more. I'm also the newly elected local North Florida chapter of the AMS president. So that's a lot of fun. We actually just won NWA chapter of the year for last year, which I was also sitting on the board for. So that was a great time. But I guess my weather interest, it came from hurricanes, 2004, 2005. We were smacked with Katrina when it first hit Florida, down in South Florida, and Wilma, and we got both of those that season. Outer fringes of Francis and Jean. But then this was probably the first bona fide hurricane that I experienced where I actually had some sort of meteorological knowledge. So that was nice. I actually knew kind of what was going on. And especially my friend Levi Cohen here, everyone knows Tropical Tidbits. I got to meet with him a little bit. We chatted, and having the official Tropical Tidbit in your ear the whole night was nice. So I'm like, what's this thing doing now? And he would always kind of throw around some stuff. But it's really good to be on the show and share my experiences.
Yeah, and Matt, where are you originally from?
I'm from Fort Lauderdale, so just north of Miami, down in South Florida. So it was hurricanes are in my blood. Not so much tornadoes, but hurricanes. So this was kind of an event where us student meteorologists were geeking out to the max. at least until the power went out.
Well, talking of Hermine, it was I don't know, a 20-day storm, and Shay, I'm going to toss it to you for a little bit because we have told you're our tropical guy. We've been following this, it seems like, for 3 to 3.5 weeks. Kind of just tell us about how it all started and what we've been watching throughout the past couple of weeks.
Sure. Yeah, I did some screen shares, so I don't know who can lock me in. Can everybody see it all right?
Yes.
Okay. I've got Grant Gilmore. I had to find something on the fly, the total track of the system. But you can see it started out as a tropical wave off of Africa, made it all the way across as a weak wave into the Lesser Antilles. And then once it got to the Greater Antilles, everyone thought, the expectation was that this thing would become a depression at least. But it really just kind of took its time going up and above the Dominican Republic, north of Cuba. The mountains and the topography of those islands both hindered the development of the system, so it remained as an invest. There was several times I think that people were like, gosh, when are they going to go ahead and upgrade this system? And the National Hurricane Center, I think, did a fantastic job holding out because there just wasn't enough strong winds wrapped around the core or convection wrapped around the core. It seemed to always be trailing off to the east or southeast quadrant of the system, and so you didn't get a lot of the southerly inflow able to make it up and around the storm until it got clear of Cuba to the west. So once that happened, you can see here in the Twitter feed where right when it gets to the western side of Cuba, the central low develops and then it turns into a tropical depression and rapidly heads to the north and north-northeast, becoming a hurricane right before landfall over the warm Gulf waters. The upper shear relaxed over that system as well, and that was another factor that was hindering its development as it traveled north of Dominican Republic and Cuba. So there's several factors that kept this thing just shy of developing into a tropical system, and we're very fortunate that it gained speed as it headed into the Florida coast, into the Big Bend area, because I think another 24 to 36 hours over that area of the Gulf up in the northeast Gulf would have been, may have gotten this thing to a major status for a hurricane. It really, really blew up there at the very end. But you can see the track sort of taking it off, and it's been lingering for days off the mid-Atlantic. It lost its tropical status once it sort of rode along a cold front, became more of a frontal embedded system. It actually started occluding along the northern end, which means that it's taking on colder air and it's trying to dispel the warmer air. The warm core stayed just enough for it to remain a tropical storm for a bit, and then they took it off and named it PostTropical Cyclone. And so that lingered for a couple of days. With tropical storm force winds along the coast. They're still dealing with that up there. So it's not quite over yet. They still have some surging, a little bit of additional tides and high waves and rip currents going on along the mid-Atlantic up to the northeast states. So not quite out of the woods yet, but that's the general track. This is from the SIMS track where you can kind of see where it became a low and then into a tropical depression and headed up to the northeast. Let me see if I can find this quick loop. Unidata did a great job on a little video feed that I found, and this is kind of right where it's coming ashore in Florida as a hurricane with a distinct eye, and it was 80 miles an hour was the top wind speed right before it made landfall, and you can see how it just tracked right along the Carolina coast and then off of the Outer Banks out into the Mid-Atlantic region. So great little video from Unidata, and I think that's it for me, unless you guys have any questions about it so far. I don't know if I explained all of the history, but I'm sure Matt would love to add to it if he has anything.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the storm, what we were watching down here is the Euro, and boy, this was the biggest headache of a storm to forecast I think we've ever witnessed. And we saw the Euro pick this up and slam it into Tallahassee pretty early on in some of the runs, back when it was kind of this whole blob of nothing down at the Bahamas. And that kind of got my attention because it's, the Euro. If you see something develop, you got to pay attention, but GFS didn't have anything. So I kind of woke up a little bit seeing that, and then a few days later, Euro dropped it, and I was like, well, I guess it's done. And then, of course, we saw it all come back together in the Florida Straits. So at least from a model trend perspective, not that there was really much of a trend, but it was kind of something where we were kind of on guard, maybe, or at least myself was on guard maybe a week before, but I knew the threats about watching models that are over 5 days out. They're get more unreliable at that point.
Let's talk about this, and I know a lot of people, us in the weather community, we know what I'm getting ready to talk about. So, but the general public doesn't, and forever, even it's got its own hashtag now. You can still look it up as Invest99L. So, David or Matt or anyone, let's kind of talk about the public what an invest is, and then Shay was talking about just a little bit ago what a post-tropical cyclone is. I mean, all these words, a lot of the general public just know tropical storm, hurricane, tropical depression, but what is the invest, and what about post-tropical cyclone?
Yeah, I mean, Invest 99L, they usually reserve the 90s for the Atlantic Ocean, so like Invest 91, 95, 99, stuff like that. It's just basically an area where center is watching things, and they can actually start running more hurricane models for that specific area of disturbed weather. And so that's just kind of helps demark some of the different ones. Like you could have like 3, 4, 5 of those invests or tropical storms or hurricanes. So it just kind of lets the National Hurricane Center know where each one of these is, and you can follow along with it. And then post-tropical is pretty much what Shay said. It took on kind of fronts and kind of got colder air aloft embedded within it, so it wasn't called a warm core anymore. So in other words, the temperature didn't go up, and then you had the low-level circulation, and usually in warm cores you have the upper level high helping to ventilate the system. It kind of gets rid of all of that because the warm core status isn't held together, so you're starting to get colder air mixed in, so it takes on more frontal characteristics. So that's kind of really what happened with Hermine in the end. But I know a lot of people were like 99L, and you're just like, what in the world? And I see Shay there trying to show some of the, I was talking about when it was trying to go post-tropical, when it was trying to get some of the energy at 500 embedded within it and slightly cooler air, so it wasn't completely warm core anymore. But in terms of the public, you're right, Scotty, it's a bit of a headache, and you're like, 99L, like what in the world is 99L? I'm used to named storms like Allison or Hermine or Ian with the next name on the list or things like that. So it does kind of cause some confusion, and you do need to take at least a little bit of time to maybe elaborate that to the viewer on a nightly basis. I mean, I do that whenever I show dew points here in Central Virginia. I'm like, hey, dew points here, 70 or above, and incredibly humid. I also use this to help forecast overnight lows, and then boom, I go into the low graphic saying, and that's part of the reason why we're looking at overnight lows in the lower 70s the next couple of nights, because the dew points are going to be so much higher. So it's just kind of up to the broadcast meteorologist. It's kind of our responsibility to take at least 15, 20 seconds to kind of elaborate that to the viewer so that they can at least gain a little bit of knowledge for hopefully future events. And after a little while, after a couple of years of you doing it, hopefully they become more accustomed to it and aren't as confused by named monikers like 99L.
Yeah, totally agree, David. And that very confusing for some. A lot of people ask me, whoa, you know, this thing's post-tropical cyclone. They say that it's going to be going back to hurricane. I mean, you can see this was September the 3rd where the National Hurricane Center was expecting this to maybe go back to hurricane status. And you've got an occluding area here where it's taking on some cooler air at the mid to upper levels. It's keeping a warm core. There's the Gulf Stream down here to the south, feeding up some warmer air. But then you have cooler waters to the north. I mean, you got a lot of cold air injection into this system. And so that's where it becomes really confusing for people. Post-tropical, but then it could become a hurricane again. You know, how does it do that? You know, what is it subtropical, or what kind of hybrid system? And you know, and one thing I always just tell people is subtropical, cold core. All right, post-tropical cyclone, warm core. You could even call it a oh, I don't know. What's the other term for post-tropical cyclone? Not subtropical, but there's another term for it, but just to throw more into the mix of it all. Very confusing once it's entered out to the Atlantic off the North Carolina coast. But Matt, if you want to join in on that.
Yeah, in terms of the naming thing, down here, it was a mess because it went from depression to hurricane in about 24 hours, and it was broadcasting wise. We kind of saw this a little bit more in hindsight, and since FSU, our main communication, at least FSU weather, was through Twitter and social media outlets. We did have a little bit. We did the broadcast, we did the live stream, and some people tuned in, but really most of what people saw was through Twitter. And really, and even in hindsight, when we were talking to the public, they had no clue it was going to be this bad. And some did who lived through Hurricane Kate, and I'll get into that in a little while. But in terms of the naming thing, it was an issue down here because how do you tell people that a hurricane may be coming when it's just Invest 99L or Invest whatever? It was really a challenge to do, especially some of my friends. I was like, hey guys, we should probably think about preparing. And they're like, prepare for what? There's nothing out there. So it was another one of those cases that, we've seen this a couple times in the media the last few weeks, especially with the Louisiana floods. Something that's not named, doesn't really have anything to give to the public in terms of urgency. And that was an issue that we really saw down here.
And I believe, guys, I may have fixed my microphone to see if it sounds better. But there was some, can you hear me better now?
You're quieter and still a little garbled.
Okay. I don't know. I'm having issues tonight. This is why James isn't here to do all this stuff. So, anyways, we were talking about earlier in our group chat last week that even some of the media members was frustrated because this thing wasn't getting a name, and it was not far from big places like Miami or Tampa or even up in Tallahassee. So let's kind of talk about that and then how fast it really intensified. Shay, I think you said earlier in the beginning, if this thing would have been another day in the Gulf Coast, in the Gulf of Mexico area, we could have seen a major hurricane. So let's just kind of talk about how it just rapidly intensified in a little less than 12 hours.
Well, I'll defer that one to Matt since he was in the area. You guys were really studying the system. I didn't see that much of a drop in pressure over a 24-hour period, but I do tend to think that given another 24 to 36 hours at a slower speed heading north, that thing probably had some potential there. There's no upper level shear. The convection started to wrap around the core. All four quadrants are starting to see deeper convection, a more solid core. Everything was becoming more symmetrical. The outflow, you had anticyclone aloft. You had all the exhaust mechanisms were in place. The system was breathing, and you take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. It had a lot of. Most of the student meteorologists down here kind of saw this coming, in a sense, where the hurricane was going to intensify. We kind of, we were throwing around numbers, and we kind of thought maybe 90 miles per hour at landfall, and it was 80. So we were a little bit off, but we went kind of to the high side. And this is one of those situations where we were, not really too happy that we were right. But it was a system that it intensified to the point where the pressure, it went down, but it just went down to a point where I don't think the public was ready for something like this. And I think that was kind of just a combination of the fact that Tallahassee, in particular, it's a forest city, and it pretty much is in a forest. And everywhere you go, there are these large oak pine trees that are hundreds of feet tall, and the root systems are really tiny. And, you get even a small wind, even the tropical storm, if it was a tropical storm, it came through here, it would cause some damage. But the National Weather Service was hinting at, there were probably some areas east of town that had some hurricane force gusts, but the only one that was recorded was 64 mile per hour gust here on campus. And winds like that will snap those trees like matchsticks. And unfortunately, underneath those trees are houses, power lines, and whatever else is in the way. And a lot of cases, we saw a lot of cars and restaurants with trees on top of them. And that was one of those things where, anything from a tropical storm and up would create a big headache for the infrastructure here. And I think the day leading up to it, wasn't really expected to be that bad, but we were kind of getting ready for it to be bad. And then after the damage assessment on Friday morning, which was the day after the storm, when we went out there, we knew it was bad. And then the infrastructure, the utilities people came out and said that 80% of the entire power grid had sustained severe damage. And that's like pretty much almost the entire town was without power. There were some cities down south of here, some smaller towns that were 100% in the dark. And I'm sure if someone has a satellite picture of the Big Bend that night, I'm sure it would look pretty eerie. I meant to look that up somewhere, but that was one of those things that I know we were talking about intensity, but even from tropical storm and up, we were watching this thing as soon as it started wrapping the convection around, and then as soon as it started to take this, it was kind of heading on a northeasterly track, and then all of a sudden it was like, nope, turn north, kind of wobbled to the north for about 3 hours or so, and a large area of convection that started to build up, and a band started moving through, and we saw this thing coming, and we're like, this is going to be the one to knock power out. And I think that the eeriest thing going off of that was we were facing east, and the winds were blowing east to west, and we could see in the distance power flashes progressively getting closer and closer to us. And we knew that this was a wind gust. Either this was the wind gust or this was just this band. And as we saw power flash after power flash after power flash, then it hit the campus, and the entire city of Tallahassee went dark after that. And it was, something that I don't think a lot of people realize how bad it actually was down here and in Florida, really anywhere right now with these temperatures. You lose power for 5 days, you're sleeping in 85-degree weather, and you don't really sleep. So luckily, most students kind of skipped town and went to areas that actually had power. But it was something eerie to watch. And I don't know if many people saw my picture that I posted on Twitter where the campus and the state capitol were dark. That was one of the eeriest things I've ever seen. Even though the winds gusted to 64, many people are like, 64, it's just a tropical storm force wind, just a Category 1 hurricane. I think this was something for me that finally said there's no such thing as just anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
We got a sorry, David, if you want to go ahead. I was just going to share something real quick, talk about the winds, area, if you can see this.
I was just gonna reinforce, Matt, that 64 was recorded at Doak, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was at Doak.
The STEM site there.
Yep.
Yeah, and many people who aren't familiar with Florida State, Doak is kind of in one of the lower parts of campus, and then you have the Love Building closer to the top. The Love Building is the meteorology building, and I'm assuming you guys were up on the roof where the map room is, and they have basically a wall of windows facing off to the east, facing towards the state capitol, where Matt was saying things were coming from. So he was up top, higher than where Doak Campbell Stadium was. So, I mean, it wouldn't be surprised to see, especially at the top of the Capitol building, if they had hurricane force winds associated with that. So I think that made that 64-mile-per-hour gust, at least to me, that much more impressive, because Doak is a little bit lower in elevation compared to the rest of campus. So I was definitely surprised by that. And I'm like, well, somebody got 70, 75-mile-per-hour winds probably.
Wow. Yeah, we picked up Bald Point down near Alligator Point. This is about the area where this made landfall, near St. Mark's. And this was very close to the eye. Not a lot of data points there, but the Bald Point picked up 78 miles an hour gust, average is 61 miles an hour at 9:50 p.m., 78 miles an hour at 10:15 p.m. So that's about the right time. Actually, our station out here in Appalachia Bay, goodbye. It's gone. So right at the highest peak there at 9:29, maybe a little after 9:29 p.m., our station went in the water. So that one's gone, and we hope to get another one back there soon. Just may have to wait on the Coast Guard to see about using their Navigate out there. But either way, that's all the real data points I got. That's the highest ones I could find was at Bald Point.
That's interesting stuff. And also Matthew brought up some very good points about him saying, okay, there's no such thing as tropical storm. It's just a Cat 1. It's just a Cat 2, because it impacts people differently. Because he said he's from Fort Lauderdale, and I had quite a few friends down there on the East Coast and South Florida. And the whole makeup of South Florida is completely different than the makeup of North Florida. North Florida, like Matthew was talking about, you got a ton of trees, and these are hardwood trees that just snap like a twig in winds greater than 40 miles per hour. And then you have South Florida, where, yeah, you have some of those trees still, especially some oak trees now and then, but it's mainly palmier stuff, and it's more flexible. So it probably did more damage to the Tallahassee and the Big Bend region with it hitting there, as opposed to maybe hitting in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. Because if it hit there, yeah, you'd have some power outages. They're going to happen during hurricanes, but it wouldn't have been nearly as extensive down in like the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area as opposed to the Big Bend region, because again, you have Apalachicola forest on the doorstep to Tallahassee and just all these trees. And I think that's the biggest kind of challenge that we have as broadcast meteorologists, is kind of looking back at that history. And I saw some of my other Florida State friends, and they're like telling their friends who aren't meteorologists, just like, hey, take this seriously, because you get winds 50 miles per hour, you're probably losing power. And unfortunately, they saw winds even higher than that. So that's definitely the challenge that we have as meteorologists. Is just like, hey, yeah, winds are 80 miles per hour, but like, what about the impacts? And I think that's something that we are becoming more aware of and definitely are improving on, but we could definitely do a little bit better job.
And Matt, well, sorry, I was looking at TweetDeck. We have a question for everyone that was affected by Hermine, but especially you, Matt. Was this is from Craig on Twitter, Craig CC. A lot of people follow Craig there on Twitter. So Craig, thanks for watching tonight. Student at Mississippi State. He wanted to know if this was the worst storm that you've been through, Matt, and then any of the rest of us that was affected by it.
For me, well, thank you for the question, first off, but it was a different kind of storm. And the reason why I say that is I'm on my own. We're all on our own up here. We're kind of the voice to these students. So a lot of the responsibility, I feel like, falls on my shoulders. And I feel like a lot of the unpreparedness of some of the students is partially my fault. Of course, I'm going to blame myself. A lot of the student meteorologists here are blaming themselves for not getting the information out that they could. But in terms of the storms, Wilma was definitely the worst for me down in South Florida, because we got, I think it hit as a strong Category 2. It's been a long day. Strong Category 2, and it was a 3 just before landfall. So this is almost a major hurricane at landfall. And we got the southern eye wall in Broward County, which is just north of Miami-Dade County. Pretty much the whole time. We had winds gusting to 107, 110 miles per hour. And we were without power for Wilma for 2 weeks. We were without water for 3 days. And that was the experience that got me into it. And to tell people, to try to get them to understand that you like weather because it inconvenienced you and pretty much ruined your life for 2 weeks, it's a strange thing to kind of purvey or to get across to a lot of people. But Wilma was definitely the biggest one for me. Katrina, when it hit South Florida, it hit as a very sort of similar system to this. It was intensifying over the Gulf Stream waters as it started to move in, and it became a Category 1 just prior to landfall. But this one was a bona fide, strong Category 1 hurricane, and this one was just a different type of bad, just because going around, seeing the damage firsthand, I saw a very emotional scene where a guy was in the street, neighbors were out, and there was a tree that was probably, I think it was on his house or something, I don't quite remember. He was just sitting in the middle of the street crying. And to see this was like, this is one of the harder things that I've ever had to see. I've never seen a tornado. I've never chased a tornado. I've never seen tornado aftermath. But when you see something is what you think is little as a tree falling on someone's house, car, whatever, and just this man bawling in the streets, it was like, geez, this was really bad for this community. And, it hits people in different ways. But that was the long and the short of it. Hurricane Wilma was the worst intensity, at least for me.
Shay, I know that you felt some effects of Hermine there in Charleston. You want to chime in on the question?
Sure. For us here in Charleston, we had we had two different directions of winds and two different elements going on with the system. Number one, being that the center of circulation passed so close to our west, our southerly flow really ramped up along the beaches. Luckily, we didn't have a high tide during the peak winds, so our tide was outgoing during the peak winds, which was a huge help. The storm was not off the coast in order to bring us a large surge, so we were spared that. But our winds we got 49 mile an hour average at Folly Beach Pier. That was the highest average recorded. Highest wind speed was 63 miles an hour on Sullivan's Island in gusts. On the wraparound winds, that came from the northwest. Later on, we already had about 9,000 or 10,000 people out of power in the Tri-County area. And once the winds wrapped around from the northwest, the gradient tightened and the winds came back almost as high as they were before during the daytime. So you had sort of a downslope feature transitioning into nighttime and some rain banding. When everyone thought that the winds were over and the rain was over, it actually turned back on again, the rain and the wind, and it got very gusty, and we lost about 8,000 or 9,000 more people with power. So fortunately, it was most areas got back to normal very quickly. I'm sure you folks down there in Florida, Matt, are still dealing with a lot of issues down there. We were spared quite a bit of that. We had some flooding, not very much, nothing to really complain about. Like I said, no storm surge. We had some high winds, power outages. We had one death in Charleston out in Cottageville. A gentleman was trying to remove a tree from the road and a car struck him. So, unfortunate situation there, but that's the only death that we had associated with Hermine across South Carolina. Most people were very aware of it. I think the communication got out very well. There was some media hype days prior to that got people kind of thrown off. That might be a topic for a different night, but when it came down to it, when it was making landfall, everyone did a fantastic job getting the word out, and people were very aware of what was going on, and surprisingly little traffic on the road this time, so it's good.
Before I get to Peter to ask him his effects up there in the Northeast, because I know it's totally different than what Florida and along the Southeast coast had, what was the tornadoes like? Was there any tornadoes there in the Big Bend? Matt, I know I think all of us here on the panel was watching radar until 1 or 1:30 whenever it made Landfall Thursday night, early Friday morning. Was there any tornadoes, confirmed tornadoes? I know there's some warnings, and then Shay, I honestly didn't pay attention much to Charleston. Was there any warnings up in that direction either?
Just tropical storm warnings. We did have some tornado watch zones built all the way up and down the coastline earlier on. I think they were trying to push that until, I believe, about 4 o'clock p.m. They had those watches issued all the way out through the whole day. Once the southerly winds passed, they took that down. But there were some tornadoes overnight during the nocturnal hours, early morning into southeastern Georgia and southeast South Carolina. There was one in South Carolina that I know of. They did verify that as EF0. But, yeah, there was several warnings issued that morning early. I was up at like 4:30 in the morning, and I already saw warnings coming across around 5 or 5:30. But I don't think all of those were verified, and I'm still waiting to see all the LSR reports. They're still trying to do it. It's going to take them a little bit of time.
All right, and Matt?
Yeah, we actually we had a few tornado warnings just to the southeast of our area, and that was when things were starting to, we didn't know what to cover in here with the tornado warnings, hurricane, everything was going nuts. But we did have 3 of those tornadoes were confirmed, all in Taylor County. So that's pretty far southeast of us, kind of in the northeastern quadrant of the storm where you would expect to see exactly where that is. So once that started wrapping up and around, the threat for tornadoes kind of diminished, but there was still a possibility for something small to spin down.
And David, I know you and I and James were watching this via our message board that we do, and we even seen tornado warnings even as far as Orlando and places up into Jacksonville as well.
They had a couple tornado warnings out near the Lake Buena Vista and Disney area. They also had some tornado warnings up in the eastern portion of Georgia as well. I remember Ricky was watching his one friend, Garrett. He's in Jacksonville, and he had to go on for a tornado warning that had a nice TDS associated with it there north of Brunswick. So definitely probably a handful, maybe 2 handfuls of confirmed tornadoes with this. So there were tornadoes, but at least it wasn't a crazy tornado outbreak like other systems.
Yeah, and I think for North Carolina, I believe there was 2 or 3 confirmed by Moorhead City Office. Our buddy Gary Stevenson was tweeting and Facebooking about that a couple of days ago. So there was a few, but like we said, not a big outbreak that we have seen it in past. Peter, I want to get to you, but this next topic kind of will bring you into the conversation with storm surge. I guess one of the coolest things, but not cool in a sense, was Mark Sudduth had a camera up in, I think it was Cedar Key, where he had the storm surge cam up, and you could just watch the progression through the day into the night, and then as Hermine was making landfall, I think at one time we saw a dock actually go across the road from the storm surge. So talk to us a little bit about that down there in the Big Bend area, and then Shay and Peter, I'll bring you guys in as well, because you guys did see at least some surge up there in the Northeast.
Yeah, we at least in the Big Bend, I was able to do an aerial damage survey a few days afterwards, where things were for the most part getting cleaned up, but I did see some damage. Alligator Point, Cedar Key was pretty hard hit in terms of storm surge, and Alligator Point is another one of those areas that were hard hit. I think there was a boat on the road, whatever was left with the road, at some point. And when I flew over those areas a day and a half ago, it still looked as though there was still some damage down there. Really, those communities could have seen it a lot worse. I think they were all built up on stilts, and it seemed like the stilts that they were built up on were really sturdy. So there might have been some minor damage to some houses and areas. The road was kind of ripped up. It looked pretty bad. But from what I saw from the air down in the St. Mark's area, Alligator Point, which is pretty much due south and a little bit farther west, it didn't look too terrible, and at least from what the estimates could have been. But granted, that was 3 or 4 days after the storm, so probably a lot had been cleaned up by then.
Any storm surge for your part of the area, Shay, and then Peter will go to you.
No, we had about a foot or two, I think, that, and it we didn't get over about a foot. I honestly, it wasn't so much of an issue. I was more concerned about the wind and power outages. So went into when you're in forecast mode at that time, I was really all over the wind speeds. Number one, also watching radar. The storm surge didn't seem like that much of a big. It really wasn't that big of an issue because the tide was out. Now, when those winds came up later, the tide was coming in, but it was offshore wind, so equally fortunate that it kept those waters out. Usually when you get an overpowering offshore wind, it makes the high tide about a foot or a foot and a half less. So that was a huge help. But I've got the local storm report I got some of Tallahassee. I'll go ahead and screen share this. The Tallahassee all the way through National Weather Service Charleston, and there's really, I think they're still trying to populate these LSRs. I'm sure that a lot of the storm surge issues down in Cedar Key and those areas will be forthcoming. But you can see all the tropical storm force wind icons on the screen here. And as we go up into Georgia, there was a tornado right there. Let's see, South Newport, EF0. This one right here, that was near South Carolina. That was EF0 as well. Heading up the coastline, really just a lot of wind reports. There was lots of trees down, lots of power lines down. And as we get into North Carolina, I put it in Wilmington and Moorhead. And here's Moorhead right here. You can see 0 tornado as well. I'm sorry, EF1. That was EF1 tornado. And that was in, I guess that would be close to, it doesn't say exactly near Gloucester, one near Marshallburg. And that was the EF1 as well. So, yeah, two EF1s. Looks like a water spout touchdown here near Harker's Island. So North Carolina saw that on Outer Cape near Cape Cape Lookout. And that's pretty much all I can see from the LSRs from what they've populated so far. Only 2 tornadoes in Georgia, 2 in North Carolina.
And then Peter, once Hermine went through the Big Bend area and went through the southeast coast, it eventually had its eyes set for you guys up there in Jersey. Fortunately, the models that depicted a much closer grace to your area didn't come to fruition. But talk to us a little bit about what you guys all experienced up there this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was, judging from the models, if everything panned out, this was going to be a really, really bad weekend down the shore. But luckily, it didn't happen that way. But we still see some waves from this whole week. Right now, Atlantic City, Cape May, we're seeing waves around 3 feet or so, and the swell is 3 to 4 feet. So we're still seeing moderate rip currents. So I know a lot of beaches were closed the last few days. They didn't want anybody in the ocean or getting near the ocean. So you know, I know it did ruin a lot of plans, and everybody was mad about that. But luckily, we missed the brunt of the storm. We missed a good majority of the storm, and we only got a little bit of wind, some rip currents, and a little bit of beach erosion up and down the Jersey coast. But that was about it.
Yeah, and it was I don't know, it was kind of controversial up there because you guys, with Sandy, that still in the back of your mind, you know, a lot of people vacation up in the Atlantic Beach area and all the way up in the Northeast. I know there were some people that were not very happy with the forecast up in your area, Peter.
No, they weren't, because you know, the forecasters up here, I can't blame them. You know, they were saying this was going to be a really, really bad storm, and it could have been like Sandy again, possibly. But of course, as we all know, it didn't happen. So everybody's all mad, and you know, but you know, everybody's still recovering from Sandy to this day. So I don't know why you would even want something major to happen again, because houses are still getting rebuilt and beaches are still horrible. So luckily it didn't happen. So I would say just be happy nothing happened.
Definitely. Always better to prepare than not be prepared. So,
Right.
And Kit, I'll toss it to you because you're in the Charlotte area. We were right on the outer band of that, so talk to us a little bit about what all the Piedmont area saw.
Well, like you said, the Piedmont area was sort of the very last bit, or the furthest inland that any rain could get. But it was sort of like Friday night. I was going to go hang out with a friend for her last night in Charlotte. She's moving up to Washington, D.C., but some of the rain bands were coming through, and it was just making it a nasty mess. But at one point, it was kind of in the center of circulation. When it was meandering down in the Gulf for a while, they couldn't really find this actual center with the Hurricane Hunter airplane drop zones and whatnot. So that sort of gave us a little bit of a shock when the National Hurricane Center gave us a forecast cone with some of the inner part of the forecast cone was coming right through the Charlotte area. So that would have been interesting to see. Granted, it might not have had enough moisture to pull off of the Gulf, so it might not have been like in Charleston where 60 miles an hour, but it still would have been pretty bad because we haven't really had a lot of rain recently, but it's been enough that the ground would get saturated, and then we'd have a number of trees down, just like in the Apalachicola area. So once they finally found the center, it was like, I think 2 forecast cones issued with it coming over North Carolina, Piedmont. But even still, we got a good bit of rain. Check the monitor comes out tomorrow, and parts of Mecklenburg and Gaston County and some counties in South Carolina were under abnormally dry. I wouldn't be surprised if enough rain from Hermine to sort of knock down some of the abnormally dry regions, as well as for down towards the coast. I know there's a number of places out there that have some. I'll see if I can find it real quick. The drought monitor. Because all in all, it was somewhat needed rain that we got. Yeah, there we go. So like, there's a swath of abnormally dry that goes up from like Rockingham and Fayetteville up through Wake County. Let's see if I can't screen share real quick. Share. Here we go. So yeah, you see out here towards the mountains, there's a bit of a severe drought down there in Cherokee County, but over here in Gaston County, that's probably going to get knocked down tomorrow, as well as this swath right here down towards the Sandhills. Because I think the track came right through, what is that, New Hanover County. So those outer bands were starting to give a good bit of rain through the Sandhills. And I think in South Carolina, they should probably get knocked down a little bit on their droughts through their Sandhills area.
Yeah. Those areas definitely should. I'd say over by Augusta, upstate South Carolina, where the red is, the extreme area.
Right.
They got a pretty good bit there. I mean, most areas in the Midlands, the upstate got a pretty good bit, especially later. And that's one thing I talked to David about the other night was there was some moisture that was pushed into the mid to upper atmosphere, upslope into the mountains, and then so when the wraparound winds came, it just feeds it all the way back down the coastline. So the Midlands all the way to the coast, actually the upstate all the way to the coast got another kind of an injection of rain from behind the system. So that I think most of our areas should be, I wouldn't say out of the drought, but at least most of those areas knocked down. Be interesting to see what the next product's going to show.
All right, guys. Well, we're closing in on the 9 o'clock hour. So my last question, and this is for everyone, is now that we've had our first brush with a hurricane, what did we learn from Hermine? What can we take from it as we kind of finish out the rest of the tropical season? Matt, I'll let you go first since you're our guest.
Okay. The biggest thing, I think I kind of alluded to this a little bit before, that we learned from Hermine is, one, that this was an annoying storm. It was around for 2.5 weeks. It became something of a drag to try to forecast, and then when it finally had its sights set on Tallahassee and we knew it was going to be bad, it became even worse. So not only was this thing hard to forecast, but now we were going to start to get the brunt of it. And I think the biggest thing that if there's anybody who you talk about overhype and hype and all this stuff, and unfortunately that's the nature of public business. It's the nature of broadcasting. But when you're in it and you know that, as I said before, there's no such thing as just a tropical storm or just a Category 1, it kind of opens your eyes and try to help you think a little bit differently, maybe how we can try to approach this differently in the future. But unfortunately, the public is going to be the public, and that's how it is. That's what makes this so tricky, is how do we take something that, you spend years studying and convert it into something where people can respond to. And I think this has been an area of exploration for years. It's going to continue to be an area of exploration for years. And I'm interested to see how it goes. And for me personally, this was a real thrill. We got to go hang out in a hurricane where we could just go stand outside with a bunch of meteorology majors. And it doesn't get much better than that until the power went out about 2 a.m. But it was something that I won't forget. I won't soon forget as an experience here. I mean, my freshman year, we won the national championship in football. And then now my senior year, we got a direct hit by a hurricane. I don't know. Maybe I should. I don't know about that. But anyway.
Lucky.
Retire on that note.
Yeah.
I have to say I learned how to be patient, the main thing. Going on guidance from the National Hurricane Center, regardless of how you feel about things, regardless of what you're seeing, what you're agreeing on with colleagues and other experts in the field, that you're saying, wow, what is the holdup? But really, you gain a lot of respect for the National Hurricane Center in a situation like that, where there's this persistent wave that the models are blowing up over and over and over again, or they're not, and they're so on and off. So I think that's my main thing, is I learned a lot of patience with this system and how to sit back and just take it hour to hour, day to day.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much it's just like the models are going to change. Definitely continue to look at ensembles. I mean, you learn that up here in the mountains and snow forecasting and everything else. And that's something that I think a lot of people kind of miss out on, and they just see it's just like, wow, look at this 982 millibar hurricane trying to make landfall near the St. Mark's area, like the Euro showing at day 10, which, by the way, it did show that. I shared that with the group on the message board, but I was like, I'm not sharing that out to the public. But, I mean, overall, like, they did a great job, the models, that is, with the track. Yeah, there were some westward movements and some eastward movements, but, I mean, in the overall grand scheme of things, that's just noise. And to, again, just I think this was a good primer for the state of Florida. Unfortunately, Tallahassee and the Big Bend region bore the brunt of it, and that's probably one of the least hurricane-ready areas in the state, at least in terms of just trying to get everything back up and running in a fast manner, especially for a weaker storm. And then just like, all right, just look at the big picture. Don't always look at the small, like 982 making landfall in St. Mark's. Look at the big picture. Look at what everything is doing. And just trying to communicate that to the public.
Yeah, I think I learned pay attention to the small details, looking at all the information that the National Hurricane Center put out. I think when we saw that westward track in the models, I think they said that the center had initialized wrong, maybe a degree or two, so that brought in that westward track. So just pay attention to the small details. Pay attention to what the National Hurricane Center is, and it's always better to be prepared than not to be prepared at all. All right, guys, we'll wrap it up. I'm going to let Matt give an opportunity to share his social media accounts with our followers and our viewers, and that way, if they ever want to get in touch with him, they can tweet him or Facebook or however you want to, whatever you want to give out, Matt.
Yeah, if you want to tweet at me or follow me on Twitter, I've been fairly active during the storm. I can answer any questions. It's at Reagan Matt, and Reagan is spelled like the president, so Reagan. Some people botch the spelling, and so you can find me there. I also have a Facebook page, student meteorologist Matt Reagan, but for the most part, I'll respond quicker, and I'm on Twitter a little bit more, but I'll figure that one out later. But if you have any more questions, shoot them at my way, and I'd be happy to answer them.
I appreciate you coming on. I know it's been a long day for you, and thank you for allowing us to have you on for this hour.
And Scotty, I've got one more thing to add before we close the show, and I think it's important to get the word out. There's another article circulating around on the internet saying that Charleston's going to be hit by a hurricane. It's the same one that came out in August the 20th, I believe. And, you know, I got to say, you know, you just got to be careful what you're looking at. So I definitely want to put this out there for the viewers. This is the only thing we have going on in the Atlantic right now. I don't know if you can see the screen or not. Are we good?
You haven't shared yet.
Okay, how about now?
Nope.
Still waiting.
Nope. All right, let's try this one more time.
Oh, there we go.
Okay,
There we go. There it is.
All right, so I don't even want to put the article up because it's first of all I couldn't find it. I think whoever had it deleted it because they realized it was a hoax. But this is the only thing we have going on in the Atlantic right now, a single tropical wave coming off of Africa with a very low chance in the next 2 days of development, 10%. And the actual 5-day outlook dropped to 60%. It was at 70, now it's at 60. So this wave is a long ways out. It's not even developed yet. In fact, it's having a hard time getting through some of the Saharan dust at the higher levels. I don't want to get too deep into this, but you can see what these waves do when they come off the coast is sometimes the immediate fight that they have is this dust, these oranges and yellows, is dust from the Saharan desert that gets trapped up at the mid-levels, and then they fight to even make it. from these. In fact, the Saharan desert protects us from a lot of these systems. So when you're seeing these tracks come out way ahead of time, you're talking 200, 300 hours out, don't believe everything that you see in the media where these systems are going to come all the way across the Atlantic and slam into Charleston, South Carolina, or North Carolina, or whatever. It's just too far out to tell. So that's really all that's going on out there right now. We're actually trying to enjoy a quiet time in the Atlantic Basin for a little bit. We're only at September 7th. The peak of the season is at September 10th, so we're nearing the peak of the season. Then we still have all the way through October and November to go. So we're still very much in the heart of the Atlantic Basin hurricane season. So keep that in mind.
And seeing even on the at the end of the GFS, what we call GFS Fantasyland, where there's always seems to be some sort of major storm or like some sort of epic snow event at the end of it that never comes to fruition. Even in the Fantasyland of the GFS, it has this system and 2 others recurving before they even get to Bermuda. So it's really something that once you see an article come out like that, there's high pressure over the East Coast that really isn't going much of anywhere for the next week and a half, which is what's going to be still so hot, but it's not going to go anywhere for the next week and a half. So we're pretty safe as far as that one that is out in the Atlantic right now. There's very little chance that it'll even make it to Bermuda, much less Charleston.
All right, guys. Well, we'll end on that. Matt, again, thanks for coming on. Remember, next week we are off. We're going to have a little break since of all the tropical stuff. We're going to take a break. A few of the guys are going to be off at the AMS conference. NWA conference. They're in the Hampton Roads area. So we're going to take next week off, but we will reconvene on the 21st and kind of recap the NWA conference. And then after that, we're going to be talking with the folks of Kokoros. We got them confirmed to come on September 28th to kind of talk about their program and how you can be involved in it. And then October, we are dedicating the full month to flooding. So we're going to be talking about the 1-year anniversary of the South Carolina flood. The next week, Marshall Shepard's going to be on with us to talk to us about his thoughts on flooding, and then a few other guests as we round out the month. So next week we will not be on, but you can catch us on any of our YouTube rebroadcasts on our YouTube page. So if you missed us that much, make sure to check one of the episodes. And if not, we will see you on the 21st. We hope you all have a great week. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the hot weather while it's around, because 2 or 3 months from now it'll be cold and it'll be wanting summer back. So you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.